Hello, everybody, and welcome to CSTA's webinar series. This is webinar number 7 of Season 2. Today's topic is all about one of CSTA's most used and beloved template tools, the Sport Tourism Planning Template. I'm Stephen Trainer of the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance, and I'll be your moderator for today's webinar. I'm joined today by Kelly Michael, also of the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance. Kelly would probably love to say hello, but she's feeling a little bit under the weather today, so she's going to be mostly helping out with the chat function. The Sport Tourism Planning Template has recently been rebooted, and today we have two of our most famous speakers who are authors of the Sport Tourism Planning Template. They are Grant MacDonald, who is president of GM Event Inc., and Blair McIntosh, VP of Sport for Special Olympics Canada. I will be overseeing technology, taking your questions, and supporting the presenters. Kelly will be managing the questions in the chat feature, as I mentioned before, and we will also have live tweeting through our @Canadian Sport Tourism account. Please join in the action on Twitter with the hashtag CSTA webinar. The webinar is scheduled to last 1 hour. There will be an opportunity throughout the presentation for questions and answers. There will also be a final opportunity for questions and answers at the end of the webinar. But before we get started and get to our main speakers, let's go through a few technology items. If you'll notice, there's a dashboard at the top right of your screen in this webinar, and the live webcams feature our presenters. So for our presenters, Grant, you're on the webcam. Can you give a wave? Awesome. Audio, can we make sure everyone is using the audio feature properly? So if you've dialed in on your phone, please ensure that you have entered the audio PIN number. Note that all attendees are muted due to the number of people on the line and to reduce distractions and distortion for all. So if you try to speak up right now to get my attention, no one will be able to hear you. If you are using the microphone and speakers on your computer as your audio, and if you have any experience, if you experience any trouble with the audio during the webinar, it can be most likely resolved by switching to the telephone audio option. So I'm going to ask everyone to, from the dashboard, to press the raise your hand option and let us know that you can hear everything. Okay, we've got everybody's hands up. That's fantastic. All right, so we will put all those hands down here. And in terms of questions, as I said before, please type your questions in the box near the bottom of your dashboard, and we will let the presenter know when we have a question and when there's appropriate time. So if you have technology-related questions on or issues, please do bring those forward so that we can try to address them right away and ensure you get to fully experience the webinar. I should mention at this time that we are recording this broadcast for our participants. We'll be editing and posting up on YouTube the webinar for those that may not get all of the webinar or want to review it, having taken part in it. And also for handouts, in your dashboard, there's a section that says handouts. There's a PDF version of the presentation provided to you, so feel free to download it before you leave the webinar. Our presenters will be running through each slide during the presentation, so please follow along on your screen. So let's get started. And to start off first, Grant MacDonald is going to be starting things off. Grant, without further ado, there you go.
Thanks very much, Stephen, and thank you everybody for taking time out of your day to join Blair and I as we speak a little bit about building a community sport tourism strategy. And what we wanted to do is, the last time that this document was developed was in 2004, and a lot has changed since 2004. First of all, event property values have grown exponentially in the last 11 years. We have co-hosting models that have emerged as a trend within the industry, and you might have heard that Canada, the US, and Mexico are now embarking upon a significant co-hosting bid candidacy for the FIFA World Cup 2026. Vancouver 2010 obviously took place on the West Coast and was able to engage Canadians from coast to coast to coast in a way that hadn't been done previously, and also gave Canada a reason and the opportunity to show pride like never before. FIFA Women's World Cup Canada 2015 was staged in 6 locations across this country, in venues of all different sizes and was able to set almost unprecedented impacts in terms of economic generation within our economy. Toronto 2015, Pan American and Para-Pan Am Games obviously were very successful. And through all of these events, as well as at the local community setting, there's been increased accountability from all levels of government, the general public, as well as media. Sport tourism, since 2004, has become more strategic. Where it used to be a ready, fire, aim approach, now it has moved much more towards a proactive and planned outcomes. The value of sport tourism in Canada in 2004, when the original sport tourism planning template was drafted, was $1.3 billion. Over that course of time, sport tourism has grown exponentially in terms of its impact on Canada's travel industry. In 2015, buoyed by the Toronto 2015 as well as the FIFA Women's World Cup Canada, sport tourism receipts in our country generated over $6.5 billion. So it is growing and continues to grow year over year, not just in Canada but worldwide. As worldwide tourism has shown some degree of impact from world events and economic events, sport tourism has continued to grow. Our sector has become more competitive as more cities and communities are looking at sport tourism as a way to generate incremental business for our local economies. Destination marketing and management organizations have also taken a keen interest in attracting sport tourism events. Provinces are now looking at strategies so that they can not just attract events, but ensure that they're delivering the types of results that align with provincial policy outcomes, and at the same time that they are able to fully leverage and activate the platform that some of these international sport broadcasts can garner. Venues have become an increasingly important component of the bid process and has become an opportunity for many communities to either redevelop existing infrastructure or to develop new infrastructure that can leave long-lasting legacies for the community post-event. Economic development has become much more engaged in the attraction of events, in how it can develop new business in our local economies, and also serve as an opportunity to attract inbound or foreign business into our local or provincial economies. Sport has certainly been working on developing its approach to hosting, whether it be their domestic programs at the national or provincial levels, or those national, international events that are part of the annual calendar, or even opportunities to grow sport. And then cultural organizations are becoming a much more important component to the animation of the experience for the visitor. They don't just want to experience the field of play, they want to immerse themselves in the culture of the local community, and cultural organizations are the best and most readily equipped in order to be able to deliver those authentic and unique experiences of every community across Canada. With Canada 150 and the importance of this year in the history of our country, there's been a lot of investment, and many of us have been involved in projects that were centered around Canada 150, and we may have been able to attract new dollars. But what happens after 2017? After all of the injection of revenue into the sport tourism system in Canada, what are we going to do in our communities, in our provinces, and as a nation in order to continue to strategically attract events, but ensure that those events are more successful? So we have embarked upon the Sport Tourism Planning Template 2.0, and we'll provide you a little bit of an overview of the project and what we have been working over the last number of months to deliver. First, we wanted to update and refine the information. A lot has changed since 2004, so we felt it was important to provide some more timely and relevant data, but also to ensure that we could have the language in the template reflecting the true nature of the sport tourism industry. We wanted to update the look and feel. It was in black and white, the 1.0 version. We wanted to make sure that it reflected the rest of the tools that CSTA has been developing over those years. We wanted to improve the user experience so that it became a much more practical tool. It is the 2.0 version, but we want to assure you that it will continue to evolve so that it won't be another 11 years before it's updated. There will be 2.1 versions and so on as new trends emerge or as new data is available. We want to make sure that we're capturing that as we go. And then lastly, we wanted to align it with other CSTA tools. Ultimately, the Canadian Sport Tourism Alliance is interested in ensuring that our members are able to access all of the information and use it interchangeably. And we wanted to make sure that the sport tourism planning template, as the cornerstone of our toolkit, is able to continue to serve and provide the on-ramps to the other tools within the suite of offerings of CSTA. The format for the 2.0 version includes an overview of how to use it, a link to all of the other CSTA tools, and unlike the first version of it, we have broken it down into 5 stages. Those are expanding the knowledge of sport tourism, assessing your own community capacity, building a vision and setting objectives, developing your strategic approach, and then a new stage, evaluation and accountability. And with that, I'll pass it over to my colleague, Blair McIntosh, to run you through the first 4 stages of the 2.0 version. Blair?
Okay. Thank you very much, Grant. I think I got this right now. There we go. Okay. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about these next 4 stages, and again, if you have questions, you can fire them away during the presentation, or I can take them afterwards. So the first stage, expanding your knowledge of sport tourism. Basically, what this stage involves is understanding what sport tourism is. For any of your communities that have a program in place, you obviously know the extent of sport tourism, the impact it has on your municipality. One of the things I've found as I've gone through the country developing some of the strategies throughout Canada is that in a lot of cases the first obstacle and the first challenge is just determining what sport tourism is and who's responsible for it. So in some municipalities there could be up to 4 or 5 different departments that have taken on the role of sport tourism, and from a rights holder's perspective, I can tell you that just lends to confusion. So I've gone into municipalities where the Parks and Rec department, economic development, the tourism department, and the events department all think that their responsibility is sport tourism. Once you bring all those parties together and they can determine who the lead is going to be, that makes it much easier to determine the role that you're going to have in sport tourism and who the lead's going to be, and it makes it much more convenient for a rights holder. The dimensions of a sport tourism event, there's a number of different types of events. So we go from the single and multi-sport events where they can be very different in size and scope. So when I use an example of a single sport event, that a lot of people may think, well, there's only 12 teams at a Scott Tournament of Hearts or a Briar. That event also comes with a following across this country that fills the maximum size arenas that we can offer. All the way up to your multi-sport events, and that can include a provincial multi-sport games up to an international game such as an Olympics. Invitational events, they're not as structured. It gives you the opportunity to bring teams in from outside of a province, outside of a country, and it's much more flexible and, as I said, not as structured. Created events are becoming more popular, and one of the reasons for that is that you don't have to basically don't have to bid against anybody because you created the event. And I always use the pond hockey tournaments as one of the best examples of that. And Huntsville is one example I would use just because I know it well, is when they started out that pond hockey tournament, they started out with about 30 teams, and by 2015 they had up to 250 teams. And again, they don't have to compete against anybody to have that event. It's their own created event. Non-competitive events, again, they have a different audience, a different spectator following, but again, you can look at the impact of, and I'll use a senior games, for example, for 55 and over, very non-competitive, but brings a lot of relatives and family members out to see the senior games and to see grandparents competing at a sporting event. And then you have your professional sport, which, again, sometimes the sport tourism component of a municipality just plays an ancillary role when it comes to professional sport, and then to some extent they get more involved. In terms of expanding the knowledge of sport tourism, again, the next page just talks about the revenues and expenditures, which are becoming big factors in sport tourism. So on the revenue side, your participants, and I use the example of, for an Ontario Games, for example, you have 1,500 to 1,800 participants. All of them pay a registration fee, so you're already looking at a revenue from your participants of about $100,000 to $150,000. Spectators is another huge revenue generator, depending on the size and scope of the event. Visitors is another one where you can bring in a lot of revenue based on the type of event it is. So I always use, now that I'm with Special Olympics, I use Special Olympics as a perfect example. And Tony Fisher, who does our STEAM assessments, backed this up. We did our assessment of our 2016 National Games in Corner Brook. Most events of a nature of an amateur sporting event, they equate it to bring in 1.5 family members to a particular event. With Special Olympics, because of the nature of our event and our participants, we average 2.5 visitors with every one of our participants. So this gives you, again, the size of the revenue generated from that many people coming to be with the participants. And then the direct, indirect, and induced revenue generation from having the event in your community. On the expenditure side, again, the bids are becoming much more expensive to put forward. As Grant said, it's becoming a much more competitive market. And I use World Junior Hockey Championships as a perfect example. I know when I bid in 2005, our guarantee to Hockey Canada at that time was about $7 million. My understanding is that the last bids that went forward for the World Junior Championships, the guarantee was up towards $15 to $18 million. So it just gives you a good idea of the expenditures of putting a bid together. And of course, when you get into an Olympic Games, those expenditures can be up in the tens of millions of dollars just to put the bid forward. The capital expenditures, depending on the event that you're going after, there may be a huge capital build that comes with that event. In most cases, for a Canada Games, there's one major build that comes with hosting a Canada Games, and that's a legacy that's left in the community, but it's also a huge expenditure to not only the municipality, but in many cases, the federal and provincial governments who also are a part of that tri-party agreement. And then the expense of hosting an event of any size, and it comes with all of the logistics that go with hosting major sporting events. And again, we highlight there the STEAM Pro 2.0, which really gives communities a great understanding of the return on the investment and the impact of hosting events within your municipality. Expanding the knowledge of sport tourism, again, just a slide on the benefits and costs, making decisions on what events to go after. Sometimes you can't always make the emotional decision. There's a business decision that needs to be made because of the cost involved in and the benefits and the return on that investment. The bid evaluation model is a great tool to assess some of the benefits versus the costs. And I would encourage you to look at that document when you're looking at the bids when it comes to benefits and costs of the bids and hosting. Stage 2, assessing your community capacity. This is a really important stage because it really gives you a sense of where you are in the sport tourism industry. Talking about your community strengths, it really gets into some great worksheets in this stage, and I'll just sort of walk through some of the worksheets. So the worksheet on self-assessment, it really gives you a sense of where your community is and what your capacity is in terms of hosting. You know, the city image, is it a safe city? Do you have a lot of city and corporate support? Those are some of the things you look at. Is it accessible by all modes of transportation? That's a key for a lot of rights holders. When you're looking at a particular event, if it's a skiing event, for example, you got to look at the climate. And I use, you know, for example, the 2019 World Special Olympics has just been announced in Abu Dhabi. Those games would normally take place in May or June. They're now having to move them to March just because of the heat. So you have to always look at those kind of things when you're looking at assessing an event for your community. The internal and external transportation I talked about, and then, you know, whether you're centrally located, the proximity of essential services to your community, the whole multicultural population, depending again on the event that you're hosting, it adds to the whole tourism experience. And then again, your political support. It's really important to have the city and in some cases the province and the feds already on side when you're hosting an event within your community. Your sport event resume, this really talks to what you've hosted in the past and what's been in, particularly if you're going after an event, you want to identify with an event that you've hosted that is similar in size and scope. You know, it's much like when you're applying for a job. You're not going to go after a CEO job if you have no experience in that sort of industry. And so when you're going after a World Junior Hockey Championship, you're going to want to have hosted a number of hockey events leading up to that type of a bid. Has the event been successful from a financial standpoint, from a sport development standpoint within your community? And one of the biggest things that a lot of rights holders look at now is what's the legacy that's been left behind with the events that you've hosted in the past. And you know, one of the major things is just to know your capacity, know what you're capable of hosting based on the experience of your resume hosting previous events. Your sport strengths. You know, this is an important one because you're going to want to really showcase your community and what you've excelled at in the past. So knowing your community sport strengths based on the facility requirements, your sport knowledge, the hosting capacity within your city. You know, I've gone to cities before where they bid on, and I'll just use curling as an example. They bid on a major curling event, but they don't have a curling club within their community. They have recreational curling, but they don't have an advanced curling organization within their community. That's really a deterrent when it comes to a rights holder because, again, they don't have the expertise within the community to host an event of that capacity and that size. Also very important to identify and know your weaknesses when it comes to your community. And everybody, this is always a bit of a challenge, is identifying your weaknesses and making those become strengths so that when you go after an event, you can turn that around. You don't want to take on an event that is beyond your capacity. Facility inventory, this is a critical one, particularly, again, for rights holders. And what a lot of municipalities have started to do is they've started to put their facility inventory on their websites, whether it's their tourism website or their Parks and Rec website, because it makes it easy for a rights holder to just tap into their community, tap into your community, and be able to walk through. For example, if I'm Softball Canada and I know that to host my national event, I need 10 softball courts. They all have to be lit. And they have to have a certain amount of seating. If that's on your inventory on your website, it makes it that much easier for a rights holder to identify your community as one that has potential to host my event. Other things that are really important when it comes to the facility, though, is all of those ancillary things that go with a facility, and that could be anywhere from lighting of ball diamonds to the type of grass, the type of turf that is on your fields, the seating capacity, and then whether it's your venue is of a provincial, national, or international standard is obviously key to a rights holder in moving forward on whether to select your municipality. Stage 3 really talks about building the vision and setting objectives, building towards your city vision. So if you as a sport tourism office aren't aligned with your city vision, it becomes very difficult to bring events to the city. So you want to be aligned with what the city's vision is moving forward. And you know, some of the things you'd have to look at is what the strategic direction is that the city is going in. What are their core activities? It helps to determine the mission of your sport tourism strategy. What you really want to also take into account is what's the marketing and strategic direction of your facility managers and the major facilities that are within your municipality. If they're not aligned, it becomes very difficult for you to go after an event if it's not in line with what that facility's vision is for its future hosting. Also, what can sport tourism deliver to the community? What's the legacy going to be? A lot of municipalities now look at not only the return on the investment, but what's going to be left within our community to help with our amateur sports system, to help with sport development, or again, and when you get into some of those bigger projects and bigger events, what's the capital legacy that's going to be left? Are we going to have enhanced facilities so that we can host future events at a provincial, national, or international level? Bidding and hosting is again, as we've talked about, has become very competitive. So the competitive market actually extends almost to a 10-year longevity now. So you can actually start bidding on events that are 7-8 years down the road. And so when you're building your vision, there's no doubt you want to have some quick wins, some events that are going to come within a year or 2 years, but you really have to plan for the longevity of a sport tourism program. So you're looking at events not only 1 and 2 years out, but also 5, 6, 7 years down the road. And then what you want to become? Do you want to become a premier sport event hosting destination, or are you just into the doing 2 to 3 events a year? So you have to really determine where you want to be. And again, your city support and the corporate support and the funding that you have sometimes will dictate and determine that. Stage 3, again, I just talked about a lot of that based on the last slide. And then stage 4, developing a strategic approach. So this is really identifying your sport tourism strategies. Again, the partnership approach. So being in partnership with all of the other departments within the city, whether it's Parks and Recs or tourism, because when people bid on an event, and I think everybody that's on the call probably understands this, when you bid on an event, you know that you have the capacity to host that event. What's going to determine whether it goes to you or not is what's unique to your municipality. So it's being in partnership with a lot of the, whether it's it's destinations that and attractions that aren't available in many other municipalities, that you can offer within your municipality. The event assessment and selection, that's an important piece as well, because you want to be able to understand what the event is going to bring to your community, but again, that assessing what it's going to do in terms of leaving a legacy, what it's going to do in terms of impacting your resume and bidding on future events. What's also important in the sport tourism world, and I've come across this in a number of municipalities, is making the most of existing events. And one of the challenges when you start up a sport tourism program, many of the events that have run on a yearly basis and sometimes for 20, 30 years in your community, and have brought in great revenues and great returns on investment to your community, all of a sudden feel a little bit threatened about the fact that you're going to be coming in, you're going to be bringing major events, and what's going to happen to their event. So I think it's really important to make the most of what those existing events are and also taking them to that next level. If it's a regional event that's been there for 20 years and it's been very successful, how do you help them take that to a provincial or a national level? Functions and organizational development, again, this is a critical piece when you're hosting events, that you have that in place. From a rights holder's perspective, it's important to know that there's a structure in place that can help take their event to the next level. In terms of the support resources and managing sport tourism, again, not every municipality has the luxury of having a coordinator of sport tourism or a manager of sport tourism, but it is important to have those resources available to a rights holder where they know that they can count on their event being serviced while it's in your municipality. The sport tourism opportunities, CSTA website's a great one to tap into what's available out there, but certainly provincial and national and even international sport federations understand the business of tourism now. And what a lot of them have started to do is post a lot of their opportunities on their website. So you can go on there and you can see, for example, on a Hockey Canada, you can see that they have 30 events that are available throughout a year to bid on. So it's become big business, but again, there's also the CSTA website where we try and capture all events from basically a regional level all the way up to an international level. And then it's really bringing it all together and determining where you're at in terms of your capacity, your resources, the support you have within the city, and if you're going to move forward with a strategy, it's developing that action plan, what that action plan looks like. You know, and most municipalities, because of the bidding process and the timelines for bids, are looking at action plans that are about 3 to 5 to 7 years in duration before they do some revisions, so that they can map out a number of events that they're going to have from year 1 right up to year 4 or year 5. And this is just a chart that's within the template that really talks about what the action is, where it stands in terms of it being a priority, who's going to do it and by when, which really helps you develop your critical path for your action plan and moving forward with a strategic plan. So I know that that was a lot to cover, and I went fairly quickly. So again, at the end, hopefully we'll have time if there was any questions. Back to you.
Actually, while I'm switching you over here, Blair, I actually have a great question. The first question of the day is from Denis from Edmonton, and he wanted to talk about the fact that it's a strategic question. So his community wants to expand revenues coming from sporting events, including national and international ones. They have sort of an infrastructure issue in that the closest serviced airport is 2.5 hours away. Do you, Blair or Grant, have any success stories that you could pass on about an infrastructure or capital challenge that was an issue and was overcome?
I'm trying. I mean, I've been involved in events where there has been that gap in transportation, and particularly, I would say, in some of our right here in Ontario, in some of our northern communities, which are 2-3 hours away, that don't have an international airport, and so a lot of the events that they host, they have to fly into Toronto and then get transported up. So I think what they've done to try to overcome that is to put the best sort of external transportation policy and process in place so that it's as seamless as possible. There's no doubt that it adds to the duration of getting to the final destination, but I think it's a matter of just making it as seamless as possible, and also adding some stops along the way. I know that, for example, when we hosted an event in Sudbury one year, on the way up, there was a number of stops to stop at attractions that just made it a little bit more comfortable in transporting the people up. But it's definitely one of the things that when you're bidding on an event, if you're landing in an airport that is a fairly long distance from your eventual location, you do have to sort of compensate for that in a way that makes up for the fact that it is that far of a distance. And it might be, again, we wouldn't put, or I wouldn't advise a community that's in Northern Ontario who's picking people up at the Toronto airport to drive them 2 or 3 hours to put them in school buses. So it would be making sure they're in comfortable coaches. There's movies, there's snacks, there's food on the bus and stuff like that. So I don't know where, Grant, if you have anything else?
Yeah, I've got 2 examples, Denny, and they're from Atlantic Canada, because there are a few international airports in this part of Canada, and I'm with you today from Fredericton, New Brunswick. And for the FIFA Women's World Cup, 2 of the countries that arrived, England and Mexico, arrived at the Halifax airport and had to transfer by coach to the Moncton area. So to Blair's point, it was about care and feeding. They were arriving on scheduled flights that arrived late in the evening after all of the restaurants were closed. So making sure that they could get a warm meal somewhere along the way and stretch their legs, because they had been flying for quite some time. That made a difference. Also, another success story is Yarmouth, Nova Scotia, who successfully hosted the World Junior A Hockey Championship. They are about 3 hours away from Halifax International Airport, and they have made that part of the experience of Yarmouth. So one of the opportunities that you do have is that you can share information. You can start the experience for the athletes or the competitors the minute they arrive at the international airport. So I would look proactively, try to reduce that barrier as part of your bid process, but go into it with eyes wide open so that you can put forth a credible plan for how you're going to be able to engage those competitors the minute that they land. And part of that is working with your airport, your nearest airport, to make sure that that visitor experience when they step off the plane, that they're met with welcoming faces of airport staff and others from the community.
Excellent. Grant, before you start, I have one more excellent question. Can I ask it now, or should I wait till the end?
Fire away.
So the question is from Michelle. She says, any tips for taking an annual international sporting event to the next level after 25 years?
Well, I'll start, and then maybe Blair can jump in. For me, whenever I'm working with a destination about how they might be able to reinvigorate some of their existing annual events, it's about trying to find that next logical step that is both meaningful, shows growth, but doesn't aim too high. You want to maintain the integrity of the event, because if it's survived for 25 years, that it has some core benefits that people want to continue. But whether it's in building a new ancillary or spin-off activity, or being able to engage a new audience, taking it from a national event to an international, engaging new markets to attract competitors from new countries that might be of priority interest, and then trying to find some potential fits with your government partners. If you are working, if it's an international event, you might be working with your provincial or federal government partners, and being able to identify some of their priority areas or target markets of the tourism partners, in order to try to strategically partner those areas so that you can create some earned media opportunities in some of those key areas, or provide some value back to some of your long-standing existing corporate or government partners. Blair?
I would have, I mean, I think you nailed it, Grant. I think those are all really good points on how to maybe take it to that next level.
Okay, anything else, Stephen?
That's it for now, but for those of you that are listening in, I know we've got a lot of people today. Just send your questions and we'll ask them after Grant is done the following section, okay? Thanks.
Okay, and as this project has evolved, it has truly been Blair and I working in partnership on this. So just to finish off the sport tourism planning template, stage 5 is a new stage from the previous version, and we wanted to build in something that has evolved out of the accountability that we spoke of earlier about what's changed since 2004. And really, evaluation and accountability is something that is not just important for us to know how well that we're doing on in our sport tourism planning and execution, but increasingly it's becoming part of our everyday life. That we need to be able to communicate to all of our stakeholder groups and partner groups, and in some cases our shareholders, in order to ensure that they're getting good value for money. And key to that is being credible. We want to make sure that we put forth information and data that is defensible, and understand that what happens in one part of this country impacts the rest of the country. So if an event underperforms in one area, then that will translate the next time that that event is staged. So we want to make sure that we're putting forth credible data both in forecasting but then post-event, so that we can have grown-up discussions about what went well and what didn't. We want to make sure that we provide good information and solid business data to inform decision makers, whether that be us in the pre-bid phase before we make the decision to bid, or whether it be during the bid process when we have to inform especially elected officials who ultimately are going to have to defend those decisions and those expenditures of public dollars. We want to make sure that they have good data on which to base their decisions. It does start pre-bid, and you want to make sure that before you go into this, that you know all of those milestones that you're going to hit. That will be both opportunities to continue with the bid, but there may be some off-ramps in that process pre-bid, so that you can understand fully and make those informed decisions, not just to say yes, but also to say no. There are too many examples in Canada of events that were made on emotional decisions and ultimately underperformed as a result. CSTA tools. Make sure that you're using all of those tools. You don't have to use them all from back to front, but if you can get something out of each of them, there is some good solid information that you can use in order to build your accountability framework. And then understanding what economic, social, and sustainability measures are most important for all of your shareholders. Obviously, building new business is important. Growing your tourism brand is important. Attracting new visitors. But there are social considerations as well. We want to make sure that we're building our communities and engaging residents in events. We want to make sure that we're using existing infrastructure where possible, or looking at temporary venues before going to those permanent builds that often become the lightning rods and potential white elephants for opponents of any bid process. So make sure that you understand what all of those drivers are, both economically, socially, and sustainability-wise, that will help you to move whatever needles make sense in your own community. With that, that is the end of the sport tourism planning template. And when I have to say that when Blair and I got into this project and we dug deeper, we were saying to each other that something seems to be missing. Something that from all of the strategies that both he and I have done across this country, there's one consistent theme that everybody is looking for, and that is, what's the other guy doing? And how can we identify where we fit across the country, and making sure that we're comparing ourselves to like-sized cities, like-sized budgets, and so on. So we have developed a pilot project, and that is a sport tourism assessment model, which again will be interchangeable and is something that we're going to roll out in the next month or so. And why the assessment model? Because we needed good industry data in order to understand how our entire industry is performing, but also to give people good solid data to base their strategic and business planning decisions on. If we're able to aggregate all that information, we can start to show comparisons so that cities aren't just guessing. Because when we're guessing in our work in developing sport tourism opportunities, then those guesses can be compounded the further that we go into the process. So as I said, those can be comparable by market size, that can be comparable by budget. So this pilot project will measure some general elements, structure of organizations, some of the financial realities, hosting assets, marketing, and performance measurement. Section 1 is general. It is just about developing that profile of the sport tourism destination or event destination, just so that we can start to understand where our city fits. Next, it's more about structure. Do we have a vision? What is our business model? What are the roles of all government partners and other organizations? Are there existing public policies that either enable us or constrict us from being as successful as we want to be? What's the bid support structure like, and how do we make decisions in our own markets? What are the partnerships that exist, or are they ad hoc? Do we have to build them every time and start over? Is there a transfer of knowledge program? Are there clearly defined roles and responsibilities, and is there a legacy program where you're planning for predictable outcomes? Section 3 is about financial, and this is about your operational funding for sport or event tourism. Is there a destination marketing fund or equivalent? Those can be called different things in different locations. They can be marketing levies, hotel marketing taxes. They can come with various different names. Tourism improvement funds. Funding by source. How much comes from public sources? We may have membership revenue. We just want to understand all of the various jurisdictional distinctions. And then how are we spending our money? What areas and what are the markets that we're focusing on? Section 4 is about hosting assets, understanding what the sport and event venue inventory. Do you have one? As Blair mentioned, many destinations are now posting that on their websites, and that is becoming a powerful tool. Do we have that data readily available or at hand? Do we also have the hotel and accommodation inventory accessible and ready to mobilize when required? What are the access points, air, road, rail, and water? Do we have a volunteer program that extends from event to event, or are the local organizing committees starting over from scratch each time? Is there an ambassador program in market so that we're able to engage everybody from hotel staff to airport staff to taxis and restaurants, so that everybody can help to animate that visitor experience? And then how do we activate on the events that we host? Do we have something that's formal, or do we just do it on an ad hoc basis? And then section 5 is about marketing. Is there a sport tourism website? When was that designed or last redesigned? Do we have solid web content? Do we proactively use social media? And is it distinct to our sport or event tourism files? And then sales and marketing expenses by channel. Where are we spending our dollars in order to try to develop that new business? And then performance measurement. We want to understand some of those measures that jurisdictions are utilizing on an ongoing basis, whether they be sport tourism, economic, purely tourism, brand, social, culture, and sustainability measures. So the next steps for this project will be to and will operate as a pilot is we're going to be, we being the CSTA, will be sending out a request for pilot participants in April. And I think Stephen has a question or a poll question that asks how many on the call may be interested in participating in this pilot project.
We do not have that one. We do have a question about whether or not the people have whether they currently have a sport tourism or event strategy currently.
Okay. Okay.
I'm going to throw that up.
Well, let's yeah, okay.
So we've got about 64% that have voted. If you're on the line there, we'd ask that you finish voting there, and then we'll read back the results. Majority of people, 78%, are saying no at this time. We're almost done here. We've only got a couple of seconds left, guys. Right. And we're going to close it out. And so you can see, share the results here. We've got about 10% that say they do have a sport tourism or event strategy, 75 said no, and 15% are unsure. So thanks to those that took part in the poll.
Well, thanks, Stephen. And so the next steps on the sport tourism assessment model will be when the pilot information is released by CSTA, and we're hoping to do that in April, that there would be a call to action for municipalities or others to participate in that pilot project. What we want to do is we want to do this on an annual basis, because everybody who does a sport tourism strategy at some point will look to do a jurisdictional review to figure out where they fit in comparison to like-sized cities or cities with like-sized budgets. So we would like to be able to develop this on an annual basis so that ultimately we can help to better inform some of the decisions nationally about our industry, but also to help give you better information that will help you to make good business planning or strategic planning decisions. So that I would encourage you to keep an eye out for in the coming weeks. And if anybody has any questions, comments, or feedback, there is the contact information for both Blair and I. And with that, we would open it up to any other questions.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Grant. Just to do some administration on the back end here, for those of you that are interested in taking part in the pilot project, we will be asking you when we send out a video file link to this webinar to all participants, if they are interested in participating in the pilot project that Grant was talking about. We will give you the directions on how you can sign up for that. And you can make that choice at that time. In terms of the questions, guys, we've already had two very excellent questions. The other one other question that's come up, and I encourage you, we've still got a little bit of time here, folks, if you want to send a question in and do it now. But the one question that's come up for both Grant and Blair is, what factors should a municipality consider in determining who their competition is for an event?
You want me to go ahead, Grant?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. One of the things that when we develop a strategy in the comparative analysis part that we look at is obviously the population in the geography of the location that you're in, and we look at what is comparable across the country, or if even within your province. We look at the volunteer base that you have within your municipality. How many volunteers are on an existing database? How many volunteers have you had in previous events? The budget and the financial support that you have within your municipality. The facility inventory is obviously a critical one. Who are you going to be up against in terms of people that have comparable facilities? And then the accessibility of your municipality, as we talked about before, just in the logistics of how easily accessible is it by train, car, plane, and those kind of things. And so those are some of the major things that we look at when we're doing a comparative analysis. And you can usually probably narrow it down to about 10 to 15 municipalities that you're going to be in competition with, depending on the size and scope of the event that you're going after. Grant, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
No, nothing I could add to that. Great job.
Okay, we have another question. The question is from Michelle, and it says, with the pilot project, do you anticipate that you might include international hosts and past comparable events and bids information for comparison purposes?
You know what? That's an excellent question, and it's something that we don't currently have, but it's something that we can add. And because this is a pilot project, we'd like to get feedback on the types of information that you would like, and will help you to make better decisions in the future. So if that's something that you would like, then I would suggest that you just take down that top email address, shoot that to me, and we can add it to the pilot project.
All right then. Well, I want to take this time. We're wrapping up a little bit early. I want to thank everyone for the participation. Our attendance was very high today, and our attentiveness was very high. And we want to thank very much. We want to thank Blair and Grant for presenting today. I know they're very passionate about the work that they do, and they do an excellent job with it. So thanks for sharing your knowledge. For all of you, at the end of the webinar, you'll be prompted to provide some feedback at the end of it. It's only one question, so please take the time to respond. We'll be following up on behalf of the CSTA with a link to the video for this webinar, video and audio. We'll also give people a reminder to people to, if they want to take part in the pilot project that Grant was talking about, how to register and sign up or connect with Grant and Blair. And in terms of our schedule in the coming months, please stay tuned for updates regarding our spring and summer webinar schedule. If you're not on the CSTA mailing list, please ensure that you sign up or get in touch with one of us at the CSTA so that you can keep up to date with our alerts and our webinar updates. We are lucky to have such great speakers, and we're lucky to have everyone here for taking part in the webinars as participants. So without further ado, thanks Grant, thanks Blair, thanks Kelly, and thank you to everyone for taking part. Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.